Welcome back to another episode of Archives and Anchovies, the podcast about whatever it is I feel like talking about that week. This week in my household is a pretty special week. The week after Thanksgiving, especially the Sunday after Thanksgiving, has traditionally been the time that we put up our Christmas decorations around the house. So get to string those lights outside, get to decorate the inside of the house, put up the Christmas tree with the kids, and do all those fun festivities. As I was thinking about the 15 boxes of Christmas decorations that I have in my shed that I have to pull out, and then we have to organize and make some sort of structure out of the chaos so that we can put the house together, started me thinking about how did Christmas decorations come about? How did we start with a tree and putting something on top of it? And how did we get to the point to where we go from something small to having a big blow up, 15-foot snowmen and things like that light up in the houses. Some people go to extravagant lengths to give Christmas decorations. We actually have in our neighborhood somebody that has a really cool display, and they have their own radio station, and you can tune to the radio station and it'll go to the music in your car. You can just sit there and watch their display go, and it will match the music that's playing on that radio station. So that's actually pretty cool. And it just got me thinking, how did we go from these types of commercialized products? How did it come to be, actually, is what I'm trying to say. So we're going to be diving into something that you're probably dealing with now. If you do any type of Black Friday shopping or anything like that, you probably went to a mall, went to a store. You're completely surrounded by Christmas and Christmas decorations. You could be struggling with unfolding lights as you listen to this episode. Who knows? I don't know about you, but I try to put my lights away every year, and every year it takes me at least 15 minutes to untangle, even though somehow I've put them on reels, I've put them and done everything that I need to try to not tangle them, but it still takes me that long. So today we're going to be exploring how decorating for Christmas basically evolved from ancient rituals, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Every year it's more and more. It's convinced millions of people that our homes will look better covered in, inflatable snow globes. And, now they have LED lights that are all year round, and you just change the features. There's all kinds of stuff. There's polar bears and there's penguins, and penguins don't even live anywhere near us. They live in Antarctica, nowhere near the North Pole where Santa lives. So somehow, though, we've decided that as a society, we're okay with this, and we just kind of go with it. So the Christmas decorations really started thousands of years ago, before anyone hung stockings or got into passive-aggressive neighborhood light display competitions and had just extravagant displays. There was ancient Rome. So there was a particular time called Saturnalia. It was their raucous winter festival that basically celebrated Saturn, and that happened to be in December. So the Romans decorated their homes with evergreen branches. They exchanged gifts, which honestly kind of sounds like they invented Christmas, except for they wore togas. They didn't wear ugly Christmas sweaters, and they probably had way fewer songs about chestnuts. Even though I was actually in Rome, 5 years ago now, and I actually tried the chestnuts over the roasted fire. It wasn't to my liking, but I did try them. And so every time we go somewhere, I definitely at least try some of the local cuisine. That one for me wasn't a winner, but if you're ever in Rome, try the chestnuts over an open fire. So meanwhile, in Northern Europe, the Germanic and Celtic people, they were doing something similar for winter solstice. So it's been a long, long time that people during the solstice have different types of festivals, and their winter solstice was quite a celebration. They brought holly, ivy, and other greenery inside their houses, which was essentially the first time someone looked at a perfectly good plant and thought, you know what, this would look better if it was stuck in my house and we just let it die slowly in our living room. That's exactly what a Christmas tree, if you get a live Christmas tree these days, it's cut down out of the forest where it's thriving and living its best life, and it gets cut, and then it basically expires inside your living room as a decoration for you. So not to be sad about it, but that's really what happens. The question is, why evergreens? Basically, in the dead of winter, everything else pretty much looked dead. So it looked dead, it looked brown, kind of depressing. If you think of maybe a Charlie Brown Christmas tree, except for it was brown, that's probably what those plants looked like. So Evergreens, just like their name, they stayed green. And so they're basically nature's way of saying, hey, don't worry, this is permanent. We weren't just decorations. They were therapy for the people that were there. So as Christianity, though, however, spread, it went across Europe, and the church leaders had to deal with these deeply rooted pagan traditions. So there are many traditions that the pagans celebrate. And as Christians went across Europe, there were some things that they personally didn't like. They didn't believe in maybe the other gods or things of that being worshipped during those times. So they basically had two options. They could fight a losing battle against evergreen branches, or they could rebrand them as Christian. So they chose the second option, which really, as a strategy, is pretty solid because it allowed them to speak the Christianity to other tribes and things like that as they were going across Europe. Those evergreens that once celebrated the solstice were then reinterpreted as symbols of eternal life through Christ. It's kind of like any major company that rebrands itself, and they have a different message. Everyone's kind of confused by it, but they start to go along with it as more and more people converted to Christianity. So by the 15th century, in Germany, however, people weren't just bringing in those branches. So they started with bringing evergreen branches, and they were in the house. They were bringing in entire trees. If the thought was, if there's a little bit of evergreen to brighten your spirits and brighten your day, make the house smell good, then, a whole tree might even be better. It's the same logic that if you're going to McDonald's and if you've ever snagged a fry from somebody, it's the difference between eating 2 or 3 fries out of their thing and then deciding to get your own fries that are supersized. It's something to where, hey, more is sometimes better. So these early Christmas trees, Christian Christmas trees, they were decorated with apples, representing the forbidden fruit from the Garden of Eden, communion wafers, nuts, and homemade paper flowers. So your tree was basically a conglomerate of all kinds of things. It was a religious lesson on the Garden of Eden. It was a snack because you could eat some of the apples. And then it was a craft project. So you made paper flowers, and basically it was extremely efficient the way they put them together. And it taught lessons in addition to being something that was beautiful in the house. So early Christmas trees were primarily there for decoration and in people's houses. And it wasn't really for another almost 400 years where we take our turn to 1840. Queen Victoria married Prince Albert, who actually was a German, and came in with some interesting baggage, including the Christmas tree that they had used in Germany. So this was something that was in his homeland, and they used to do there. This had not yet been brought to England and to the UK as it is now. So this is something that was brought to him, basically bought by him in 1840. So in 1848, this is kind of the turning point for the modern Christmas tree. The Illustrated London News published an image of the royal family gathered around their decorated Christmas tree. So if you imagine this image, it kind of had the same impact as now if somebody posted something on TikTok or if they posted on Instagram and it became some sort of viral hit. The difference is obviously it took weeks and months for these publications to be distributed. It wasn't something where you could post it and it would be seen instantly. But the other nice thing about it, there wasn't judgment or, you couldn't post bad comments about it like, oh, your tree is leaning to the left. Oh, that branch is is way bigger than the others. How come your candles aren't aligned? And yeah, if you think about this, at that point in time, they didn't have light yet. They didn't have electricity. So they put actual flames and candles on dying evergreen trees. That is a, situation possibly for disasters. It really took a lot of weeks for people to get those publications. And so it wasn't something to where this really caught on super quickly, but it did come on. So within a couple of years, every fashionable household in Britain wanted a Christmas tree. We are no different than they were then. Keeping up with the Joneses, if you see something that's on social media these days, perhaps you want it, perhaps you want to look like it. It was no different then. So they got these publications, and basically, if you're going to keep up with anybody, why not try to keep up with Queen Victoria? And the tradition jumped across the country, and then it finally made its way across the Atlantic to America. So essentially, the Britons and Queen Victoria were really the impetus for the Christmas tree being brought to different countries and especially to America. So the interesting thing, though, is that, Victoria and Albert, they probably really didn't have an idea at that point in time, by having one small illustration in a publication that got put together, that they would launch an industry that would one day produce all kinds of Christmas decorations, again, the big snow globes, animatronic reindeer, things like that. They would have no idea that that was coming. They were really just trying to have a nice holiday and bring some tradition into the family on Prince Albert's side. So really kind of interesting, though, that the way that works. So basically, Germany in the 1840s was part of where it started the Industrial Revolution in that area. And there's a small town called Lauscha, where they were traditional glass blowers. So they produced everything from glass eyes was one of the things that they produced, and they produced a lot of scientific instruments, so flasks and different things like that. And so what ended up happening is if you work today and your company has like a major shift, this is probably the major shift to do all major shifts. We had a company that went from making glass eyes, and they went to delicate glass Christmas ornaments. So the same people that made those glass eyes really pivoted to make Christmas pieces. And they thought it would be taking their expertise and making it into something that was a nice decoration and something nice for everybody. And, somehow it just worked. However, these were all hand-blown ornaments at the time, so mass production wasn't in process. And so these were very expensive, and the glass was very fragile. So they were more of a status symbol. So if you said, hey, I have a Christmas tree this year, and this is really nice, and somebody else could say, oh, well, that's cute, but do you have glass ornaments that cost a lot more than maybe even your house or the place that you live? And if somebody touches a branch, it's going to fall to the ground and shatter. I grew up with all glass ornaments on our trees, and now we do have some shatterproof ornaments, but I think even my kids grew up with pretty much all glass ornaments. And there's nothing like those super thin, shiny ornaments that fall on the ground and they break. And if you step on one of those pieces of glass, you are really going to regret it. In addition to that, for a long time, we had, not for a long time, for several Christmases, we had a couple of cats. And there's nothing more than cats like to do than to knock those glass ornaments off the tree. And then that also causes some problems. It doesn't matter, for some reason, it doesn't matter how large of a thing that you put around the base of the tree to cover up like the bottom piece, and it's nice cloth and we have a nice thick one. But for whatever reason, ornaments always missed. They always had to hit the tile and they always had to break. So just a little sidebar on my own personal stories. But man, if you think about those being extremely expensive at that point in time, where today it's not much for us to replace those ornaments, but it was pretty expensive for people at that time. So then what happened is the American industry came into being. So F.W. Woolworth, so if you know Woolworths at any point, he was a retail magnate who took these expensive glass ornaments and thought, what if we made these accessible to everyone? So not just the ultra rich, not just the ultra wealthy as a status symbol, but what if everyone could do it? So he started importing them by the thousands. And by 1890, he had sold over $25 million worth. That's hundreds and hundreds of $1 million in today's dollars. So it is something to where, as today's standards, that would be quite a bit of money, or probably just an average day on Amazon these days, because, that's a couple $100 million probably goes through that each day. So the late 19th century really saw an explosion of the commercialization of Christmas products. Suddenly you could buy tinsel, which, by the way, was actually made from real silver. It was actually originally made in the early 1600s. And so what ended up happening was, if you've ever owned any type of silver, whether that be like, knives and forks or silverware that's traditional silver, it will tarnish very quickly. So it was originally sometime in the early 1600s, they started doing just long thin strands, but it would reflect the light that was coming off the trees, or it would reflect the light that was coming off everything. But again, it tarnished really quickly, so people had to polish the silver all the time. So they soon replaced those with different types of metals and things like that. So you could throw paper decorations, artificial snow, and then, of course, we had glitter, if you remember the glitter phase, and you would have glitter or that white snow, the fake flocked tree on your in your living room, and it would take you till next July. You'd still be finding glitter and all kinds of stuff all over your floor. That snow just got everywhere. So Christmas decorations were becoming huge business, and someone somewhere was having the brilliant realization that people will buy almost anything if you put a Santa hat on it. So if we look at elves, we look at cactus, anything that you basically put a Santa hat on, somebody might buy it. So one of the things that the early trees had, that they were in the dark places. They were in the dark places of your house, so they decided to have light. So let's talk about what be the most significant innovation in the Christmas decoration history: electric lights. But first, what actually came before that, obviously, as we just talked about with Queen Victoria, they actually decorated their trees with small candles clipped to the branches. So imagine open flames on a dried out tree inside a house that was probably made of wood. Probably not the best idea. So not only it was considered festive, but it was actually arson waiting to happen. We hear every year now stories of people that plug too many strings of lights into one electrical outlet, and the electrical outlet has problems, and then it catches the house on fire, or they have too many strings still on an electric tree. Although these days, most of the lights are LED and they don't put out heat, but when they used to have the incandescent bulbs, I think I'm saying that right. I'm not sure. Bulbs on the trees, they would get hot. So I remember having to put those throughout like plants in the backyard and leave them on in winter so they wouldn't freeze. It was just enough heat that it would keep them from freezing and things like that. But when they were on the tree, they could get hot and catch your tree on fire. So Christmas tree fires were pretty much a regular occurrence, which really puts kind of a damper on the whole peace on earth message when your living room is actively burning. But it also caused a challenge for insurance companies. And I'm sure they really hated December, or maybe they loved December. I'm not sure, but it seems like it would have been something that would have been pretty tough for them during that pretty much. So 1882, Edward Johnson, an associate of Thomas Edison, he actually hand-wired 80 red, white, and blue bulbs and strung them around a Christmas tree for the first time. If you're going to resolve a problem, why not make it patriotic, right? So let's use red, white, and blue. It's colors of a lot of different flags around the globe. So we obviously know in America here, that is our flag. But here's the catch. These early electric lights cost about $300 for a single strand in the 1890s. That's roughly about $10,000 today. So if you think about you putting 4 or 5 strands of lights on your tree currently, you would have had $40,000 or $50,000 invested just in the lights in the tree. And then if you had glass bulbs before they were, mass produced, you would have been spending a ton of money on your tree. So your options were basically risk burning down your house with the candles for free or for an inexpensive candle, or you could have fire safety for the cost, of what would be today of a used car, probably. It was a tough choice for people, burn down your house or try to have electric. But the breakthrough actually came when companies like Everready and General Electric started mass producing light sets in the early 1900s. They still weren't cheap by any means, and a lot of families at that point, you could actually rent the lights for a season rather than buying them. So that was actually a little bit more practical, because you could actually rent the lights and you could save a little bit. But the downside is you might have to have them down within 2 or 3 days after Christmas and have them returned. So you couldn't get too attached to how things looked. By the 1920s and 30s, though, Christmas lights became pretty much accessible to the average families. The market exploded. Companies competed to create new colors, new shapes, bubble lights that looked, crazy psychedelic. The icicle lights for people who wanted their homes to look perpetually frozen, I guess. On a side note, those are the kind I have. They have like the little drips and everything, so it looks like I'm in a desert, and we typically don't have too much snow here, so that's what we do. All kinds of variations of lights were imaginable, and then some that nobody imagined, but really they made them anyway, so all kinds of different things. So it was a critical time in the 20s and 30s to do that, and commercialization really shifted into high gear at this point. So in the early 20th century, department stores were realized, and department stores realized that Christmas was their most profitable season. It probably still is today. However, at that point in time, it was really kind of revolutionary thinking. that they decided, hey, this is a season, and we can figure out how to market this season so that we can make the most profit possible during that time. So they began creating elaborate, window displays and indoor Christmas scenes that drew huge crowds and had people flocking to the stores. So places like Macy's, Marshall Fields, and Selfridge turned Christmas decorating into theatrical spectacles. If you've ever watched the movie Big, when he's there at the Christmas time, that huge store has a massive Christmas display. So these displays are so elaborate that they made people stop in their tracks and think, my home's inadequate. I need to have better decorations. My kids will be happier if our home looks amazing. I want to impress the neighbors. All of those types of things happened. That was the point of these massive, elaborate displays. So they showed customers basically this is what a proper Christmas should look like. And conveniently, everything in the display was for sale. So they could have a one-stop shop in these giant stores. They could make their house look like these stores, and they could take it home today. It's kind of like influencer marketing today. So it's something to where you see something, you want that. And we talked about it a little bit earlier in this episode. You want that. You are influenced by it. You purchase it because that's how you want. So it's pretty amazing. In 1924, Macy's actually launched its first Thanksgiving Day parade, which concluded with Santa Claus arriving at the store. So as far as marketing goes, this is probably one of the keystrokes of marketing for all time. The message was totally clear. Thanksgiving is over. Open your wallets. Santa needs a new yacht, or Santa needs something. So Santa is basically the Thanksgiving Day parade is over. Santa's the last thing. It's time for Christmas. And if you're Macy's, it's time for shopping. That wasn't really the message. Santa doesn't need all that stuff. He has a cool sleigh with a bunch of reindeer powering it. So I would rather have that a yacht any day. But it's definitely the subtext of what they were trying to get at is basically Thanksgiving's over. Here's the parade. And now we're Santa Claus and we're into Christmas season. So the commercialization of Christmas was definitely institutionalized at this point, which is just a fancy way of saying this is how we do things now. It's something that got ingrained into culture, and it's basically how we do it. We kind of fast forward a little bit. We go to after World War II. A Christmas decoration went to massive hyperdrive, turbocharged by several factors. Suburban expansion was one of those. So it meant more families had more space. There was more housing being developed, and there was places for people to put their decorations, places for people to put their trees. People had yards. Incomes meant more money for purchases that were maybe not necessary purchases, and the people had more income that they could use. And one of the key things is plastic manufacturing had been perfected during the war effort, which meant that we finally had a way to create decorations that would outlive us all in landfills. So a lot of the glass ornaments and the glass things that were done in the early times that would break and have to be replaced because of the war effort and them basically perfecting the way plastic was made, they were now able to produce these things. So in the 1950s, there was an explosion of plastic Christmas decorations in every imaginable form. And artificial trees made from brush bristles, later PVC, those became popular. There were aluminum trees that couldn't be used with electric lights for safety reasons. So they came with rotating color wheels. Basically, they tried to make it to where a tree couldn't be a fire hazard at that point in time. So they actually went to metal trees. But one of the problems is that it had like rotating color wheels and things like that. And so people actually had seizures and things like that because of the way the trees were designed. Pretty interesting concepts all around. Plastic lawn decorations, of course, illuminated Santas, reindeer, and nativity scenes were huge. Those turned front yards into Christmas displays. People had them in their windows. They had them on tables. We have a lot of plastic things for display purposes as well. But suddenly, keeping your yard tasteful and understanding during the holidays became a sign that you either hated Christmas or hated your neighbors or possibly both, depending on the size of display and how you did it. And then by the late 1960s, companies were manufacturing artificial trees that actually looked somewhat like real trees, which is something that I use today. I don't go and cut down a tree every year. We've probably had the same artificial tree for more than a dozen years, and every year we put it up. But according to the American Christmas Tree Association, there actually is something that way. In my research, I thought it was pretty fascinating. Roughly 80% of displayed Christmas trees in America are actually artificial. So we've reached a point where most Christmas trees have never been alive, which feels like a metaphor or for something. So we went from cutting down trees and having them burned down in our houses to having these plastic Christmas trees. It's definitely a tradition that we've taken to a new level, and really from the invention of plastics and things like that. And one of the things that we do while we do our decorations in our household, we have a very controversial topic of when Christmas music is acceptable to be played. So the Sunday after Thanksgiving, when we put up our Christmas decorations, is the first time that Christmas music is heard around our house. But interestingly enough, when I had smaller kids, we actually did some caroling and things like that. So I just took a quick look at the way Christmas caroling and some of those traditions came along as well. I don't know where it was, but at some point in history, somebody decided that we would show up at somebody's house with a group of people completely unannounced, knock on their door, and just start singing at them. It was something that a long time ago was festive. It wasn't something that people got angry about or came to the door prepared for battle or something like that. It was basically, acceptable and festive. The word carol actually meant a circle dance with singing. That sounds a lot more fun than standing just awkwardly in the cold on someone's porch out there while it's snowing. And then medieval Europeans actually would sing and dance during their winter celebration, though the early carols were often about anything but Christmas. They sang about love. They sang about, drinking, bringing in a new family, about how cold it was. Basically, it was X for the medieval times, but it was set to music, I guess. So they would basically say whatever's on their mind in 180 words or less. I know that's the old Twitter/X, but it was more musical at that point. So the Puritans, however, came along and they banned Christmas celebrations entirely, which included caroling. These Puritans must have been super fun at parties, but when Christmas was actually restored in England, caroling came back with a vengeance. By the Victorian era, the same era that gave us the modern Christmas tree, so Queen Victoria, caroling became organized and quite respectable, in fact. Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol in 1843. He didn't invent caroling, but it certainly made it fashionable. So as people read this, they were enamored with the fact of people going around and singing and creating Christmas carols. So suddenly everyone wanted to be like those cheerful singers spreading Christmas joy. Conveniently, forgetting that in the story, Scrooge actually initially wanted them to go away. But then at the end of the story, as you probably know if you've seen it, there's caroling and there's a lot of singing at the end. So it became that way. In America, caroling became particularly popular in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Churches actually, in fact, organized caroling groups. Communities had carol sing-alongs, and going door to door singing became a wholesome activity. It wasn't something to where maybe today, by today's standards, if a bunch of people showed up at your door, you might be a little leery first. So, the interesting thing about caroling, if you go back a couple months and you go back to Halloween, it's kind of the same, except for it's trick-or-treating, except for you don't really get any candy, and you do an impromptu concert for people that really are a captive audience and probably feel rude about just slamming the door in your face. You don't get anything in return, but just maybe a thank you, a clap, and a smile, not like trick-or-treating where you're getting candy. But the tradition, has faded somewhat in modern times because we've realized that showing up at somebody's door unannounced maybe is not only frowned upon, but it could be unsafe in the current society. So I know they have things like virtual caroling, and they have things where people will be, I've seen this maybe once or twice since I've been here, where somebody, drives through on the back of a truck or something pretty slowly and they're up singing carols. There are some things that are still done, but for the most part, I think in the modern day, just showing up at somebody's door and caroling. Now, people will do it for nursing homes, and they'll do it for special different places where, like hospitals, children's hospitals and things like that, where they'll go caroling. But kind of the door-to-door Christmas caroling is really kind of faded out with, the modernization. The commercialization of carols, though, that's still going strong. Every year brings Christmas albums from anywhere from pop stars to country singers, death metal bands, all kinds of things, jazz artists. They have continually created new ways to make old songs, and every year they're bought. And then You have maybe that one annoying person, or while you're going through it, you hear grandma got run over by a reindeer on repeat. And one of the other things that has made it's not necessarily caroling, but listening to music is Spotify. I looked up, this is an exaggeration, but I looked up Silent Night in my research, and I want to say there's about 47 million versions of, Silent Night on Spotify that you can choose from. Anywhere from classic, the standards, to jazz, to new age, to all kinds of music in a way that you can listen to Silent Night. So, and I guarantee you they're still going to make more, so it's not going to end. But speaking of Christmas music, probably the most divisive question of the holiday season, as I mentioned a little bit before, when is it acceptable really to start listening to Christmas music? I already said that my family's in the camp that when we do the Christmas decorations, it's the first time we listen to it and we're all having a good time. But it has torn apart friendships, divided families, caused, if you are somebody that is in Teams meetings, if you do a poll of when's the right time to listen to Christmas music, it will be highly contested inside your Teams meeting. I can guarantee you that. There's basically three camps, though, and they're all convinced they're right. Everybody thinks that they're right about everything. So it's something that is very, very, very controversial. So the first camp is basically post-Thanksgiving. That's where I sit into. These people believe that Christmas music should begin exactly at midnight after Thanksgiving dinner, not a moment sooner. That might be a slight exaggeration, but really, they think it's the lecture about how respecting Thanksgiving and letting each holiday have its moment. They're not wrong, but they're also people who get genuinely upset when they hear jingle bells on November 15th. So going back to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, giving Thanksgiving its time, and then Santa is the last thing during the parade. Pretty amazing marketing if you think about what Macy's did with that. So Camp 2, though, the November 1st enthusiasts. The second Halloween ends. These folks are filling up their ears with Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You on repeat. They can't get enough of it. They argue that life is short, Christmas music is joyful, and why should we only limit that to 1 month? Why not have 2 months if you can? So the retailers are the people that are in this camp. So if you go into a retailer right after Halloween, sometimes before Halloween, we already have Christmas decorations, we have lights, we have trees, all kinds of stuff, and those retailers are pumping that Christmas music through. And, that should tell you something, that if they're starting Christmas music that early, they think that that is the time that the season starts. So they are, though, however, the same people that have their decorations up before their neighbors have taken down their Halloween skeletons. So they are people that are very exuberant about Christmas right after the start of November. And then there's the last camp. These are people that do year round. So these people just listen to Christmas music. It could be Christmas in July. They feel no shame. They just either truly love it, they're deeply nostalgic, or possibly confused maybe how their calendars work. I don't know. If I look at a calendar, I don't see Christmas for 6 months, but somehow maybe they have a 12-month calendar that is all Christmas. I don't really know. So they don't really make anybody else feel comfortable if they're singing, Mariah Carey in June. Here where I'm at in the desert, it's 115 in June. I don't think of All I Want for Christmas Is You in that time of year, but they just might be trying to do that. They might be trying to make people feel uncomfortable. They might really enjoy it. Historically speaking, though, there wasn't much of a debate because Christmas music, as we know it, is a relatively modern concept. Carols have existed for centuries and things like that. The bombardment of Christmas music everywhere you go is real. So if you right now, as we talk about this in the end of November, early December, Christmas music everywhere. It's on all the retailers. You go to the stinking gas station to get gas, you hear Christmas music, all kinds of stuff. In the 40s and 50s, when Christmas albums started becoming a real big thing, most people only heard Christmas music at church or kind of special events. Not everybody at that point in time was able to have, a Victrola or a record player or something like that. So they really weren't always able to have that. But then radio stations discovered that something was very magical about having Christmas on the air. So Christmas music sells. Again, we go back to that commercialization. More specifically, it kept people listening for longer, which kept them hearing advertisements, which keeps stores making money and purchasing advertisement space. So the more people listened to the Christmas music on those stations, the better off the stations did. So the tradition of all Christmas music all the time radio stations didn't really take effect until the 80s and 90s. So now we have stations that flip 24/7 Christmas music right after Halloween, and sometimes even earlier. And some start mid-October even, which is, in my opinion, frankly unhinged, but it's also very profitable for them. And, for those people that are in the all year camp, they probably love it. Streaming services, of course, have made it much easier, for better, for worse, depending on which camp you're in. And now you don't have to wait for anyone's permission. You can listen to Christmas shoes that deeply manipulate tear-jerking songs at 3 a.m. on Tuesday, on late August, if you want. No one can stop you. They don't see your history, so you can always delete it anyway, probably, if you were ashamed. But the question is, should someone stop you? Again, it depends on what camp you're in. They can't, though, so it doesn't really matter. One of the interesting points in doing the research for this is there actually is some psychological research on actually listening to Christmas music. Studies do suggest that listening to Christmas music can actually boost your mood and evoke positive memories, but only up to a point. I do hear some Christmas tunes as I go through, and I remember, old times with my family, the same things that we do right now with my current family, with my kids, but we would put up the tree, we would have things playing on the record player and things like that, and we would be listening to music, and it really was a pretty magical time. We would have, friends over and things like that, and it was just a really good time. So overexposure, however, does sometimes lead to stress and irritation, especially for retail workers. So I spent 17 years in retail, part of it, a lot of it, I would say, 13 or 14 years as a manager. I'm in retail. And by the time that the second week of December was coming along and we listened to the same probably 15 songs on loop, and you're sitting in the store because you worked crazy hours at that point, you're working 10 or 12 hours a day, especially as we get closer to Christmas Eve, and those songs really started to grain on you. So if you are doing late Christmas shopping and you think that the employees are a little stressed or something like that, it could be the fatigue from listening to the same Christmas songs over and over and over for the span of, a month and a half. So be kind to them. Just say thanks. If you're in there on Christmas Eve, they're stressed out too. And part of it could be because of that, because of the music. So when should you start listening to Christmas music? Really, there is no answer. It's a personal preference dressed up as, like a moral imperative. It's like whatever you feel is the right for you. If you're playing Feliz Navidad, however, like before Thanksgiving, dinner is over, you might want to ask yourself some hard questions about your life choices. That's all I'm saying, because that might be a little bit early for me. For me, I think the safest approach is to follow the historians. They call it the Advent principle. They call it the Advent principle, which suggests that a Christmas celebration should begin for the Advent, the 4 Sundays before Christmas. But let's be real, nobody really has to follow that. There's a lot of people that don't follow that. We're all just kind of making it up as we go along. And if we all try to just get along together, it's really not a big problem. I don't, judge people that want to listen to, Christmas music earlier or put up their decorations, as long as they're not, crazy. So really, Christmas music, personal choice. That was kind of a sidebar. Sorry about it, but just something I was thinking of. So as far as getting back to some of the Christmas decorations and the economy and things like that, especially in the outdoor lightings, I'm going to call it an arms race, because I see it doesn't happen in our neighborhood too much, but I've seen some things where neighbors try to outdo each other. There's some famous episodes on TV where different neighbors are trying to outdo each other. America today alone, we spend over $6 billion with a B, on Christmas decorations. So that's a lot of inflatable Santas, reindeers, snow globes, polar bears, penguins, all kinds of stuff. We've definitely seen this quote unquote arms race and outdoor lighting displays. There's a lot of competition between neighbors. As I mentioned, there's TV shows, even the Great Christmas Light Fight, which is basically, keeping up with the Joneses series. So you can see that on TV, to where they go through the whole process of people putting them up. Some homeowners spend thousands of dollars on synchronized light shows, and that can be seen from all over the place. Some people say they can be seen from space, but obviously that's not true. But they are bright enough that, who knows, maybe they could be seen from space, but it probably violates their HOA if they have one, but they probably don't care. So There's been a split in the market. On one end, big box retailers sell mass-produced decorations at cheap prices. So if you go to Walmart or something like that, you can get a lot of really nice decorations and light sets and things like that, where they're very reasonable, they're very inexpensive. You can make your house look nice with all those. And then on the other end, there is a high interest in handcrafted or vintage type of decorations. So we've basically reached a spot in history where we can have everybody make their own, not make their own, but make their house their own as far as decorations go, but you can still buy that artisan type of stuff. So it's kind of neat. There are people that pay just a little bit to decorate their house, and they pay premium prices for, nicer items. As I mentioned before, there's now, you can get permanent LEDs installed with a whole synchronization thing with music. You can have the lights change all year. So, you can have it, pink and red for Valentine's Day. You can turn them green for St. Patrick's Day. And then, of course, you can have every shade and every type of coloring that you want as far as that goes, as far as the lights go. So we basically made a lot of plastic. Christmas decoration industry is built on making plastic versions of things that used to be real. So it's pretty exciting. The LED lights, at least, use quite a bit less energy than the old bulbs that we used to take off and throw into the street just to watch them pop because they were filled with gas. I'm not recommending that anybody did that. That was a whole thing during my youth where, yes, you would take Christmas lights and you would throw them into the street to make them break. And, there's glass everywhere. Probably not the safest thing as a kid, but probably popped my tires on my bike once or twice as well. So other than that, people are also returning to more natural decorations. So they're kind of bringing this whole story full circle back to the ancient Romans. It's called rustic chic now. The things where they're bringing in the real trees, they're bringing in just pieces. They have, on occasion, will buy a whole bag of those scented pine cones because I like the way the cinnamon smells and the pine cone smells. So I think there's some things that are going back to the way it used to be as well. So, one of the things that all of this encompasses is, has the commercialization of Christmas ruined Christmas, or has it just given us stuff to argue about? There's critics that argue that the original spiritual meaning has completely been buried under mountains of tinsel, credit card debt, and, plastic decorations that get thrown away, not to mention what gets put in the landfills and things like that. There was a German sociologist named Theodor Adorno who seems basically that he wrote about how capitalism transformed genuine culture into commodified pseudo-culture. So that meaning, in this view, Christmas has become more about buying things than experience meaning, which is kind of depressing when you think about it. But it's also hard to argue with what you're assembling, your third inflatable snowman, and you're putting all your decorations up, stopping to ask yourself why. But there is for sure another perspective. For most of human history, these elaborate decorations were only for the wealthy. Your average medieval peasant, as we talked about earlier, wasn't decorating anything except for maybe some small things or something of that nature, hand-carved small wooden things. But mass production made it possible for ordinary families to create magical Christmases, magical Christmas environments that were once restricted only to the super wealthy. So those German glass ornaments that only the rich could afford in 1850, now anybody can buy beautiful ornaments for a few bucks. Or you can also buy some truly hideous ones for even less. It's perfect democracy in action where everybody gets a vote. When families, do decorate together, when they have traditions around certain ornaments or displays, those commercial objects become vessels for your memories, of course, and love. So as we put our tree together, we have a lot of things that are put up that are mass-produced plastic, as I mentioned, the shatterproof bulbs and things like that. But we do have special boxes that are our first Christmas tree ornament for our kids. It might have their name and their date on it. Some of them have their pictures. As kids made their Christmas ornaments throughout middle school and early school, we still have some of those up there. I think everybody has an owl on a piece of wood that was made with like pretzels and a walnut nose. If you don't, those things are, truly special and give you the meaning of it. So, it doesn't matter if, something was made somewhere else. We have ornaments that from our travels around the world, it's probably mass produced in a factory, but yet we bought that Christmas ornament. Like maybe we took a trip to New York a couple of years ago to see Phantom of the Opera before it was about to leave Broadway. Of course, it's back now, but it was about to leave Broadway. So we took our kids, we bought a Christmas ornament there. Those are our ornaments. That was made in a factory. It's one of 500,000 of those ornaments made, but there's a memory that's associated with those ornaments that will never fade, and other people don't understand it. So it's very interesting to look at that and think, okay, these items that have maybe no intrinsic value to somebody else have deep meaning for you. And they may not understand that, but that particular item lives in a small place in your soul that's important. So anyway, where did we come from? We basically came from having pieces of evergreens in their house to synchronized LED displays controlled by a smartphone. The history of Christmas decorations is something that went from sacred rituals to gigantic retail opportunities. We've always felt the need to transform our spaces during the darkest times of year into something more beautiful, to create light and beauty when the world outside is cold and somewhat depressing. And at times, maybe everybody's arguing politics at dinner or some things like that. But we've always had the desire to make it nicer. So that impulse has been commercialized, and companies have figured out how to profit from our desire for Christmas magic. If you have ever seen that movie, The Polar Express, that is some serious Christmas magic with the bells. Probably one of the greater movies as far as talking about the actual magic of Christmas. And retailers have gotten very, very good at doing that. So if you walk through any stores in November, December, you'll see those evidence. Again, all the inflatable things, singing Santas. We have this time of year, we have Elf on a Shelf, of course, that has become something of a meme, but is also pretty fun and people like to do and take pictures of. But it's also part of Christmas commercialization, if you really think about it. So they even have things that we don't even have to do the work anymore, pre-lit trees. So you don't even have to do the fun part that maybe creates the memories of your youngest child being lifted up to put the star on the top of the tree, or an angel on the top of the tree, or whatever it is that you put on top of the tree, or the time that somebody did break an ornament and cut themselves, even though it sucked at that time. There's always those stories as you're putting these together. So the nice thing about commercialization is it's made it popular and possible for people to participate in it, but they've also made that the ability to create those traditions and those memories and things that were once exclusive only for the ultra rich. Here in 2025, we probably really can't think about that. But the next time, you think about you're untangling your lights and you're questioning life choices of why you have so many boxes of Christmas decorations, and thinking about maybe how much money you've spent on those, remember, you're participating not only in a tradition that stretches back thousands of years, you're also connecting with the people in your life that are the most important to you, that you love dearly, that hopefully they will continue those traditions on if they have their families. And, gathering around the tree, getting it lighted for the first time, there's something magical about that. So the decorations may be commercial, but the feelings they evoke and the memories that are created by those, and maybe sometimes the arguments too, about like where the tree should go. That's always a big one in our house. Those remain genuinely the human part of this entire thing about the Christmas decorations. It's one of my favorite times of year. It's honestly one of my favorite days of the year, as I get to have my whole family together and we get to listen to Christmas music, sing along. We get to groan when some of them come on. We all sing when some of the other ones come on, but everybody's moving around and bopping their heads. And I am so excited this year to be able to do it. So I want to thank everybody for listening. Hopefully, if you were driving, you're driving safe. I hope that this was something that's entertaining and also hopefully makes you think that the next time you are putting your Christmas decorations up, which could be today, which could be in the next couple of weeks, take a minute to stop and cherish the time that you have with your family, with the people that you care about, doing something fun that it's a tradition that goes back thousands of years, and now we are taking part of it. So I want to thank you, and I hope everybody has an amazing day. Thanks for listening to Archives and Anchovies.